Take one. In 3, 2, 1, action.
Welcome to SAGA Speaks, the official podcast for the South African Guild of Actors. For those of you who don't know, I'm Hungani Ndlovu, and this space is a space for actors, industry leaders, and boy, oh boy, today is a special episode. I am so excited. I'm even a little bit nervous, but I think it just comes with how much pride I have in these two individuals, how much learning I have experienced from these two individuals, and just the rawness of how they love what they do. I've got founding member Carlynn De Waal-Smit, and I've got our chairman Jack Devnarain. Welcome, and how are you?
Good. Thanks, Hungani.
Yeah, so good to be here. Thanks.
Yeah.
So, Jack, for someone who doesn't know you, what is it that they need to know about you to kind of contextualize you sitting there today for the conversation about Taryn?
Who doesn't know me?
Oh, that's a very big question.
Yeah. I think the context for how I'm here, why I'm here, should start with the fact that I'm a professional actor. So I've worked for over 25 years in film and television, live theatre productions, and it has been the privilege of my life to be in a creative space, working, collaborating with other creatives who give their lives to writing, to creating pieces of theatre or scenes or episodes or series or entire movies. And when I say creatives, and I don't just limit myself to actors, I also talk about the technical crews as well, and also the background actors. For me, the creative economy needs to be seen in its fullness. At a certain point, I realized that the industry in South Africa is deeply flawed. It's a dangerous, a toxic, and a destructive space. And until we start to recognize the truth of what the industry is, we wouldn't know how to approach resolving it, correcting it, building fairness, equity, symmetry, and integrity. Asking and answering the question, why is this industry so unbelievably unfair?
Yeah.
And I suppose it took me long enough, because actors are well practiced in self-delusion. It took me a long time to ask that question.
Yeah.
But at the moment that I did, it was a choice between the red pill and the blue pill.
Yeah.
And the moment you take that pill that reveals the truth of what the industry is, you can never unsee it. And it became a course of action where activism became far more important to me than acting.
Well, I'm glad you asked the question.
Yeah.
And that you're here today. Madam Carl, how do we understand who Madam Carl is?
So, in the context of where we are, I think that I was a dancer from the age of 5. So for me, performance was, as similar to Jack, it was just part and parcel of who I am.
Yeah.
And having finished studying and kind of coming into the industry after injuries or whatever, it was like, okay, so where am I going to fit in now? Stage manager production, and then had the opportunity of starting an agency for actors. And I've always preferred being behind the scenes than I did in terms of being on the spotlight. So it was natural for me to be supportive, and for me to be nurturing, and for me to be that in terms of the agency culture.
Yeah.
And I think the thing that really has always stood out for me is how unfair it is, and how powerless performers are in the context of their work. I had a very, very quick, fast track to learning about contracts and learning about the industry and learning about what is fair and terms and rates and all of that stuff, because there isn't anywhere you can go and study to be an agent. It's not like you can go to, a film school or a, theatre college to go and go, oh, I want to be an agent. So, often it's that learning on the job. A lot of agents have worked in existing agencies and then opened up their own, etc. So, I didn't come from that. We came in as a culture. This is the kind of culture that we wanted. And within that, very much being that kind of walking journeys with actors, seeing the injustice along the way, just made me more eager and more angry, actually, to have to do something about it. That I cannot sit around and watch things happen without doing something about it to change it, unless I'm willing just for it to be complicit.
Right.
That I'll be complicit to this being okay. And sometimes it's like really powerless. And then it's hard not to feel complicit, because as much as actors are powerless, often your business partner, as in your agent, is also powerless.
Yeah.
But trying to find the power within that and trying to create the team within that to be, to kind of sit there and go, we can do something. Don't know what yet, but we can do something. And that something has evolved, and where opportunities kind of have come along, that's been really important to make that change. And this year, I've been an agent for 30 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a long time.
It is. I don't know where the time went. But yeah.
That actually leads me into one of my, I guess, like first questions, which is to kind of give a bit of an understanding. So prior to SAGA's existence, from an agent's perspective, what was this like South African actors landscape like? Like, what was the reality of actors at the time?
We're talking 1996. So it was shortly into democracy.
Yeah.
It was really uncertain. Nobody knew like where anybody stood. There was minimal, comparatively with now, there was minimal content. We had the SABC. Mnet had just also kind of come onto the scene. There was no ETV yet. Theatre was kind of going, and the diversity had not shifted as yet into like really people telling diverse stories.
Sure.
We had generations that had come on board, which was fantastic, because that was creating a demographic that was vital. So I think there was this excitement around there's new opportunities. Suddenly they're actors. And where did the actors come from? Because they didn't have opportunity before. And, for us to really grow as an industry in telling different stories and, old producers having to do different stories, new producers doing new stories. I think that evolution, we're kind of on the brink of something beautiful. And there were certain productions that came in that really kind of held the zeitgeist of the time. And funnily enough, Generations was the one on the one side, and then Isidingo was the other.
For sure.
Coming in to create that almost like the environment that we want to live in, the South Africa we want to see, the interactions that we want to have, things to aspire to, as much as they're the baddies and the goodies and everybody in between. I think it started making television that was relatable.
Sure.
And before that, it wasn't relatable to most of the country.
So you would say that you were quite hopeful at the time?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think it was hard because nobody knew how this was going to work.
Yeah.
So we could and because I was a new agent coming into the industry as well, I had to look at the more experienced agents and seeing what they did and how they did it. And it didn't quite work for me in how the philosophy was around how agents were working. So for me, it felt like it had to be collaborative.
Sure.
Like we had to be partners. Actors and agents needed to walk this journey together where, the old school, and you see that in like the old movies, the agent decides and they,
Right.
sit there and wield their wand and you will do this and my actor does that. And that kind of was, I think, the remnants of that, that I didn't feel like that's who we wanted to be.
Sure.
So yeah, I think part of it was that the exciting part also was that international productions were coming into the country to shoot as well. So there was that little bit of a taste of, what happens overseas and how people are treated. For a long time, we were the perfect B-grade movie destination. So action movies, that was kind of where people would come to, the straight to DVD films. So we had a market, that we could service here.
I think there's people who don't even know what DVD means.
Fair point.
Yeah. Before streaming.
Yeah.
I was born before Google.
Oh,
yes.
That's a flex.
Yeah.
You should
Before cell phones.
Oh,
Yeah. Before TV.
yeah. There's that.
Yes. Before
Jack,
TV.
I know when we have a moment to talk about SAGA and all that SAGA is about, you prefer not to really dive into your personal, career, but I think it's quite important just to continue laying down the ground so that people really understand what we're dealing with. So from your personal experience navigating the industry prior to becoming chairman of SAGA, what was that like for you? I mean, we kind of have a glimpse of how the industry was shifting and stuff, but personally, what was your experience as an actor?
Like so many actors, I came into this industry, with stars in my eyes, hoping to make a contribution that will be valued.
Sure.
Hoping that somehow I could bring something unique, special, and my contribution would mean something. And I was very fortunate in coming to the cast of Isidingo in 2002. I was absolutely welcomed by the most incredible cast. It was built on the real understanding of what the new South Africa was intended to be.
Sure.
Diverse, equal, fair. Everyone was giving their best because we all had a sense of ownership. In the same way that the drafters of our constitution in 1993 and 1994, even up to 95, a lot of the laws were being redrawn, redrafted. People were seeing that they had a contribution to make to a new South Africa, a rainbow nation, as it was called then. In the same way, people were giving the same in a production where everybody felt as if their contribution mattered to the whole. So your contribution was valued as much as everybody else's, and that you are all taking ownership of the success of the bigger project. So I suppose that the success of Isidingo was a microcosm of what was taking place on a bigger scale in the country itself.
Sure.
And it was, I thought it was the gift of a lifetime. Absolutely the gift of a lifetime to be in that moment, in that energy, in that spirit, and to take it as a learning opportunity. And yes, of course, I had studied performance at school and at university, but I spent nearly 10 years of my life between university and my work as a professional actor, working in the civil service, working in the police in Durban. And that had given me other skills.
Sure.
Skills of understanding public administration, justice, understanding the law in a very raw nuts and bolts kind of way. When you're in law enforcement, you start to appreciate law in a different way. You actually get like physical confrontation and violence becomes part of your language. And you had better be good at it.
Sure.
Or you're not going to be an effective policeman.
Right.
In my case, I was working with an extremely high-performing, highly productive, hugely successful team working in a plainclothes unit. I had to learn fast, and I learned from some of the best professional instructors and professional policemen. My superiors were very supportive, and I take it for granted, or I did back then, but the lessons that I learned about human relationship dynamics, what happens when you mobilize a crowd, what happens in the moments of people exercising their will in the kind of way that exploits and abuses other people. You see all this happening in front of you. As a policeman, you have the authority to intervene and to exercise and enforce the law to actually do something about it.
Right.
Or even if it is purely an administrative exercise where you are saying, I am building a case to investigate a particular crime. And that can take many months. But the discipline that goes into that actually transposed perfectly into my life as an actor. I was able to exercise the same level of personal discipline, which is what you need as a freelancer. You know this. But more importantly, I had the opportunity to look at the industry early on to see where the injustices and the failures of the industry lay. I could see the weak points, the failure points. I could see the fractures. And I didn't have the wherewithal as an actor to say, well, how do we fix this? I suppose you could say my policeman brain kicked in to say, but what's happening to that actor or what's happening to that group of actors is unjust and it's unfair. And to be able to write, you can imagine as a policeman, you'd write a statement, an arresting statement. You'd present your statement in court and you'd be cross-examined based on that. So you learn very quickly, you've got to have a tight case or your case is going to be thrown out of court.
Right.
In the same way, I come into this industry and I start to draft my thoughts about what are the failure points and where do you fix this? And even though I had these ideas, I had an approach. And that for me was important. I just didn't have a vehicle.
Sure.
The vehicle in which to lobby, to mobilize, to activate other actors who have a sense of agency. I use that word in a different sense than Carlynn just did. But one of the key points, and Carlynn referenced this as well, is that actors must have a sense of taking ownership of their own careers. If you don't have that, you are literally the producer's dream actor. You are the perfect fool. And you will be earning less than everybody else and working the hardest. You will be delivering more scenes every day over longer hours. You will be earning less and you will have more obstacles in the path of your career success than anybody else.
Yeah.
And unless you start to see clearly, identify, call out, and act upon a real strategy to start to turn the imbalance around, unless you have that, you will always just be a whining, hysterical, emotional, irrational actor that's going to go on to some screaming session on social media every once in a while.
Yeah.
And you will never actually do anything about it. And you will be reinforcing the very notion that people already have about actors being irrational and emotional.
Yeah.
The question is, what was I going to do about it? And I think this is where our paths crossed between me and Carlynn. And I think she's much better at telling that story.
You have segued so beautifully. I mean, I'm hoping that one day we'll be able to see those drafts, handwritten with some old brown paper.
No, we never had paper in those years.
So what did you use?
Sanskrit scroll.
Papyrus, yeah.
Sanskrit,
In
yeah.
some
We used to
caves.
write in
Tablets.
symbols.
Madam Carl, so what's the breaking point? Like, how do we get to the point where we realize that something has to give and someone needs to do something, and you being part of that clique?
A moment. It was a moment. So there was a production called Jacob's Cross,
Mhm.
which was going into production, and Mnet at the time sent contracts through, and they had taken out the commercial exploitation and repeat fee clauses like you have in the SABC and ETV contracts. They'd taken that out of their contract.
Yeah.
At the time, I wasn't one of the agents who was kind of in the thick of all of that stuff, because I was still relatively newer. And I was invited to go into the meeting with Mnet and some of the PMA agents, Muni, Claire Rogerman from Leeds, and myself, with a pro bono legal team who I had not met before because I'd kind of come in, and then the multi-choice legal team, or Mnet at the time. And there was this discussion around the Performance Protection Act and what did apply and what didn't apply. And the summary of all of that was, if you don't like our interpretation of the Act, take us to a tribunal, which is what we got from Mnet. And we didn't have a tribunal because it doesn't exist.
Right.
So you exit stage left, and then what? And I was so irate.
Sure.
It was August, I think it was the 4th of August, 2004.
Yeah.
I actually found emails a little while ago. It's like, I need to know that date in my head. And I discussed it with some of the actors that I knew, and Claire and I discussed it, and eventually we were like, we have to sit around and talk about this because this is not okay. And we were like 4 or 5 of us in my lounge going, what does this mean? And what are we going to do about it? And what can we do? And like feeling helpless and angry. And I think that, anger can be a destroyer or a motivator. And I'm not a destructive type by nature, so it had to be a motivator.
Sure.
And so we sat down and had a look at what we could do. And I remember it was myself and Claire Rogerman. It was Lawrence Joffe, who's an actor, Greg Melville-Smith. And we kind of sat around going, what do we do? How do we do this? And then kind of additional people came on board as we continued the conversation. So it was Stacey Comer, who at the time was a presenter, actress, but she was also studying law at UJ. So we were like, you got to come in and help us with this law stuff.
Right.
And then Corinne Bromberg, also an actress, she agreed to be the administrator. She was like, she can organize and she can put things into files and she can send emails. She can do that, which was a huge asset.
Yeah.
Because we're all really busy, and that way at least, and I mean, she gave years of her life for nothing.
Sure.
No pay, no anything. But she really was, Mrs. B was amazing. And so we then started making connections with who else. There was Grant Swanby in Cape Town. There was Hans Strydom, who's also an actor. Zane Mears, as I mentioned. And then Jack as well came on board, to the point where eventually we realized that we cannot be a union because we're employees. So the only thing
We're not employees.
We're not employees. So we cannot be a union. We cannot do what unions do. So we had to be a guild. And I don't think we quite understood what that meant in terms of that we're not employees at the time. It was kind of like, okay, there's this thing that says you're not employees. In the Labour Relations Act, it says excluding independent contractors. So, okay, we're excluded. So what can we do?
Right.
We tried to do a little bit of research at some point into all of that, and Stacey was really helpful. And so we had a meeting at the Joburg Theatre, and just went, anybody who's keen and interested, arrive. So there were over 100 people that arrived.
Squashed up in the space.
Space.com. And there was some passionate communication happening.
Yeah.
And lots of people said a lot of stuff, and it was great because we realized that there were other angry people that had a similar, that wanted to be heard, and that had a similar desire to want things to be different. And out of that, a little while later, we had another big meeting at Sacred Heart School. Because up until then, we thought it was going to be the South African Guild of Artists, so that it could kind of encompass. Right. And then at the meeting at Sacred Heart, we realized that the people who were involved at that point just didn't know about artists. They knew about actors.
Sure.
So it was in that meeting that it was decided, and some people were unhappy, but we understood that like there's only so much capacity.
Right.
And that's when we also decided to get an interim board. And I think that's where you came on board.
Yeah, I attended the meetings. I can't tell you for the life of me even now why I decided to attend.
Well, friends of yours said you must go, so you
That's
went.
right. And I'm not normally that impressionable or easy to influence.
Sure.
So, with all these meetings, eventually you're trying to find some structure.
Yeah.
But it all came from a place of people recognizing that something has to be done. Like stuff isn't working. Something's not right. And not everybody, even me included, could always articulate what wasn't right.
Yeah.
Or what needed to change, or like the solution of it. Like a lot of times we didn't know the solution, but we knew that we needed to go into a direction.
I would go so far as to suggest that we didn't even know that there was a problem.
Wow.
Yeah.
Or like the specifics of the problem.
If you are fed into a closed system where you don't know right from wrong, how would you know if you're being exploited? Wouldn't you just imagine that, well, this is how the industry is, so that's 100%. What I must put up with?
Yeah.
If you are fed into a closed system where the rules are entirely drafted by the people who control the system,
sure.
Why would you imagine that there's anything wrong or anything different that can be done? How would you would typically blame yourself to say, maybe I don't fit in this system. But it would never occur to you that, number one, you didn't have the right to contribute to the rules. Nobody's there to police the rules. If I break the rules, I'm punished. But if they break the rules, then nothing happens.
Yeah.
But nobody questions it because nobody stopped to ask, is there something wrong with the system? Now, I had come from, in my work in the police, I was a union member. I had belonged to 2 unions because you can.
Right.
And if you got a problem, then you go and have a meeting with your shop steward. You raise the issue. You can raise a grievance. You can participate in industrial action and still keep your job.
Right.
I remember colleagues of mine who were outside protesting because there was some issue with the benchmark rates or the salaries that were being negotiated at collective bargaining time. And they were out in uniform and they were busy protesting outside the station. And I thought, okay, well, this guy, like, they're going to lose their job for sure.
This is not going to end well.
But no, because they're protected by the union.
Yeah.
It was a protected industrial action. And I understood then what the power of a union was. But you come into a system where, as Carlynn described, the rule is by virtue of your freelance contract that you may not join a union. You cannot participate in industrial action. You do not have a shop steward. You don't have collective bargaining. There are no benchmark rates. There are no standardized contracts. And if you question it, then there's something wrong with you. That's the system that I walked into. And of course, it didn't feel right. But where do you start fixing it?
Right.
We enter this universe of the creative economy, and you start looking for the architect. Who's the architect? Like, where is this person? Who do you confront?
Sure.
Like, is there a person behind the name SABC?
Right.
That you can ask for an appointment and maybe, raise some of your concerns.
Sure.
They deliberately keep it as opaque and as nebulous as that because they don't want to take a meeting with you. They don't ever want you to have to question the things that concern you.
Sure.
So it was strange and astonishing to me. In the production environment, there was a very clear reporting structure. And I was used to that because, I would just come from a system where I report to my sergeant who reports to the senior officer and then all the way up to the chief. I can do that in a production environment, speak to the AD who'll talk to the director who goes all the way up to the executive producer.
So we hope.
We hope. But it's a reliable system that you can trust.
Yeah.
But once it goes beyond that into who writes the rules of this matrix, everything goes blank. Suddenly there's nobody to talk to. There's nobody to respond to your email.
Sure.
And as in Carlynn's case, the trigger that set it all off was, if they do take that meeting, they'll say, take us to a tribunal, which is sending you back over the edge of the abyss,
Sure.
where there's nothing. There is no tribunal, and they're not going to help you to create one, will they?
So they basically take on a meeting to waste your time.
Correct. Correct.
They take on a meeting not just to waste your time. They take on a meeting to stamp out their authority in the fact that they know better. And who are you? And have you not read the legislation? Because it doesn't actually cover you. So take us to a tribunal. That's the difference in attitude between come and, you're going to sit, have a meeting, take our time and waste your time, versus the arrogance and the condescension of we know better and who do you think you are? And that often, even within the current structure, as Jack was saying, who are these people who make the rules?
Yeah.
Them supposedly who make the rules are the people who will continue holding that line of we know better, we're in power, who are you? You don't know anything, and how dare you step out of line?
Yeah, and to add to that, and the reason why it was so critically important to create the organization is one of those questions that you will be asked if ever you get that meeting is, what's your mandate? Because if you decide, as Hungani Ndlovu, to pitch up in front of the executive and say, I have a problem with this, I think we should address it.
Yeah.
They'll say, well, who's we? You signed a contract. That's an individual contract.
Right, independent.
So you can only deal with the issues relevant to what's in your contract. But who's going to deal with the industry issues where the entire system is built against you? That you don't have a mandate to tackle that question. You only have a mandate and a right to engage with whatever is in your contract. So the bigger question about the mandate is a critical one, and it can only be dealt with by mobilizing a large group of performers who are fixed on a certain direction to achieve a certain outcome.
Yeah.
And it is for the organization and its leadership to paint a very clear, vivid picture of what is the end goal and to draft a very clear roadmap for how we're going to achieve it.
I'm trying to still hold on to the hope that we started off with, but it's very quickly disappearing. Jack, you're a professional actor. Carlynn, you're running an agency which is in partnership with actors. You're needing to get work from the very same people that you're having these challenges with. So SAGA forming, to me now, this sounds like it's just a pipe dream. Or is it a form of rebellion? Like, how do we play SAGA understanding that this is the world that we are in? Because that's a tough one. Because if we go in this direction, will contractors continue to receive briefs and so forth for the very actors you're in partnership with? Will your face continue to bless us with a whole bunch of different characters on screen, on stage, wherever? How do you navigate that?
You know what? I think the one thing that we're really good at is navigating relationships. And, SAGA always started by saying we want to be around the boardroom tables where we can make a difference.
Sure.
And I also think that the way in which SAGA started was about creating relationships, understanding what we are, why we are there. Over the years, we've become more activists than we started out as it's gotten worse, to be honest.
Sure.
Things are worse now than when SAGA started.
Wow.
And that's a fact. It's not like things have necessarily gotten better because we're there.
That would be the assumption.
Exactly. And the thing is, our job is becoming more and more difficult all the time. And I have this thing that says I have to leave it in a better place than when I found it. And that job at the moment is incredibly hard because at every turn, some of the things that are happening are criminal, inhumane, and I have a whole bunch of other expletives I can use.
unconstitutional.
Yeah, that's one of the good expletives you can use. And I think that it always became clear. Well, the vision was always quite clear to me. Like it was a shift and a transformation that needed to happen, that needed to include people rather than being us against them. It needed to include. So, for example, early on, there were some of the casting directors, that we were working with, that we would have conversations with, and because they interact with international best practice, they were like, well, it makes sense. Like, why wouldn't you? Because it's not like what you're wanting to start here is something that's like a pie-eyed idea that doesn't exist.
Right.
It exists somewhere else around the world, and we
it's here to support everybody.
Exactly. And for us, it was okay. How do we get that? And I think the relationships that came from that, and realize that the interim board and then, the first board, all of the individuals who are volunteers in the EXCO all have various relationships within the industry.
Yeah.
And they all have good relationships within the industry. So it's not like you had people coming onto the executive that were, kind of a bit dodgy. They all were treated as professionals. They were professionals. They had to set more of an example than anybody else.
Right.
Because if you're going to stand up to support and stand up for actors, you have to make sure that your slate is clean. Much the same as an agent. I couldn't accept things that were not okay.
Yeah.
And at some stages, I have to say, this is what I think as an agent. It's up to the actor. Do you want to do it? Don't you want to do it? But I will put my point across to say this is the wrong of it. And luckily, I think because somebody like Claire Rogerman was there from the very beginning, the agent relationships that we had, everybody understood that it was the same issue everybody was having with their own actors. So within that, there became kind of alliances. That didn't come across as if, we're like, bearing arms and going in with guns blazing.
Yeah.
And just to speak for you for a second, I think your relationship in terms of being an actor's rep at Isidingo had a lot to do with your credibility.
Yeah, I think that was quite a useful mechanism. But, just to pick up on that, Hungani, were you born in 1990? Before? 94?
Yeah.
Wow, that's a great year.
Mm-hmm.
Just to go back a few years before you were born, South Africa was still governed by the National Party.
Right.
We were still under a regime of a white minority rule, and the majority of Black African people, South African people, were voiceless. You were irrelevant. You were a source of slave labor. The economy made sure that they could take your labor and return it for its value, which then would that value and commercial benefit would sit with the white minority for all business economies, whatever structures were created. It was an entire system that was built on that. So we are looking during the early 90s at the release of Nelson Mandela, the introduction of CODESA, but it had to be triggered firstly by the National Party initiating a process by saying, we need a mandate from our voters, from the white South African public. As the National Party, we are asking for a referendum. And we are saying, we want you to give us a mandate so that we can negotiate with the ANC and we can negotiate with Nelson Mandela and move towards a democracy, one man, one vote. Just those words were absolutely terrifying, absolutely terrifying to many white people. Or if you say no, it means then that we can't engage as the National Party with what might become a new dispensation, a new democracy under a democratic constitution. And so it was February, March or so in 1990, if I remember correctly, where the National Party, led by F.W. de Klerk, put out this referendum. And then people had to vote. And of all the hundreds of thousands of people who voted, 60% of whom said, we need to move towards a new South Africa and negotiate towards a democratic dispensation. So I've been puzzling for more than 30 years now. What happened to the other 30%? Where are they?
Yeah, somewhere.
So this is the point for me. I wonder about this because when I look at the creative industry and your question about do people see this as a rebellion? It takes me back to 1990. Because at that point, people were asking the same thing. They were saying, will one man, one vote, will our democratic dispensation, will a constitutional democracy result in this kind of rebellion? Are people now going to attack us? Is there going to be a complete free-for-all? Is there going to be disinvestment? Will our industries collapse?
Right.
People were asking the exact same questions. In 1990, all the way up to 1994, people were asking the same thing. Why? Because there is fear. And especially fear about but will these black people manage?
Yeah.
Will they be able to do it? Will they carry it? Or will they just ruin everything?
Yeah.
Which is why, as good, decent, honest, upstanding white people, we had to do it for the last 40-something years, right? So that is the thinking about what is the resistance to a transformed, regulated industry. The resistance comes from that fear that 30% that refused to go away in 1990 are still with us today, my friend.
Sure.
And they're sitting there fomenting the sense that they're going to break it.
Yeah.
They're going to ruin it. There's going to be disinvestment. The industry is going to collapse. If you want to see the source of the disinformation and the fear that's being fomented about why regulation is not going to work, ask yourself, are you part of the 30%? Are you part of that 30%?
Are you part of that 30%? It's actually so interesting because like at every turn where something new is being introduced, there's a side that is for and there's a side that is against. And I think your question, Jack, is quite profound. Where did that side that is against go? And if I think about this, it brings what you're talking on, which is the resistance.
Yeah.
So SAGA forming, what kind of resistance does SAGA then experience? Whether from industry, from producers, broadcasters, from other actors? What kind of resistance, pushback are we looking at here at the inception of SAGA?
I'd just like to pick up on that, Carlynn, if you don't mind, because it was very much a question that came up at the time of those formative meetings at Sacred Heart and at the Space. And there was real fear, and there still is real fear. I mean, we're 15 years down the line, right? But there's real fear. The question of, if I belong to SAGA and if I stand up for my rights, will I lose work?
Yeah.
And I would always like to say, yeah, you probably will. So what does it mean to you is the question.
Yeah.
What does freedom mean to you? And I go back to the time of that transformation into our democratic era, and especially as SAGA Exco, we are leadership. We are that. We represent that.
Yeah.
We have to ask ourselves every single day, would we sacrifice our careers for the freedom of this entire sector? And every day I say yes.
100%.
No question.
Yeah.
I will do it every single day. Because I know what the stakes are. And I know the price that was paid by the people who bought us. 1994 and our constitution and the democratic dispensation. I know what it cost them. What are we concerned about? Whether we might secure another job? Really?
For 3 weeks. That's it.
For 3 weeks? Honestly, nobody cares. You might have these very, very clever little comments thrown around in the big Hollywood movies when they say, yeah, you'll never work in this town again. This is not that town.
Yeah.
But do you want to be part of that town?
Yeah, it
You know what I
depends.
mean? Like that town, the town that treats people like that. Do you want to be part of that town?
What town do you want to be a part
Yeah,
of?
totally.
Which is why I have to ask every single actor, you're either prepared to stand up for your own rights and your own freedom, because nobody is going to buy it for you. And I'm certainly not expecting anybody to sacrifice themselves for you.
Yeah.
But if you can't stand up for yourself and exercise your own agency, then I feel sorry for your own career. Maybe you stand up for very little, and then you need to check yourself about what are you contributing to this industry anyway.
And I think people measure, and this is my opinion, and we probably should start having a disclaimer at the beginning of Saga episodes. I feel like people measure their contribution to our industry based on the work that they do. And I mean, to some degree, yes, there's some value in that, but I firmly believe in what it is that we believe in, which is leaving this place much better than we found it. You know, I often ask myself for my peers who are in the industry, who are, you know, getting married and having kids, and both, you know, partners in the relationship are in the industry. And I'm just like, your kids are probably going to wind themselves up being in this industry based on what it is that they see in the household, you know? So if that's the case, where do you then stand with the current state of our industry? Are you a SAGA member? Are you not a SAGA member? What are your reasons to move in the manner that you move? You know, because for me personally, the day I came to SAGA AGM, I think it was like 2017, 2016, somewhere there. And it was at AFTA in Joburg. I sat there and I was just listening to a whole lot of stuff that I did not understand. But what I did understand was that we're in crisis. There's a major issue that I can't even put together to summarize to go and tell somebody else after being at this AGM, because it was just so much. Even after the AGM, I remember we spent some time chatting afterwards, and it was so paramount to me that I need to be a part of this organization. I had no idea I'd find myself in EXCO, but I knew that I need to be a part of this organization, because what it is that SAGA stands for, I think, this is like an emotional tug for all of us, because it's like, it's about human beings and being able to see eye to eye with someone, knowing that this thing that we're doing is not only is it taken for granted, but our life is essentially taken for granted. And so when you have that picture, you get to really understand that you're walking into the lion's den by yourself and expecting to survive, because I didn't blow the whistle. I didn't say anything. I was, quote unquote, not a diva, because we have all these different terms that we don't want to be called. But I'm hearing a lot of pushback and resistance and fear, and we know this very well. So how do we then have a moment of recognizing that SAGA is working? Oh, there is some level of progress here. What is it that we experience as an organization to identify that, okay, maybe we're not just like there's forward momentum here.
Hugely.
The one thing before I answer that, I just want to say that, you know, if you don't stand for something, what are you willing to fall for? And that often has been, you know, not a slogan, but it's often been something that kind of comes around in my mind going, no, if you're not willing to stand for something, what are you willing to fall for?
That's it. Or that if you can't stand for something, you'll fall for anything.
Exactly. But I think, you know, the starting point for me was that actors were buying into this. Like, here's a membership form, they're filling it in and they're sending it through and it's being approved, and you have a card, you have a thing that's got a number on. That was the first thing for me. It's like, all of this is ideas and concepts and visions and, you know, ideals and, you know, all of that was like, there's this motion and there's this movement, but is anybody going to kind of come along? So, the moment you actually got membership forms in, it's like, okay, there's a something here. And, I'm not sure at what point I kind of felt like, okay, so like now this is working. Because I think that it's kind of evolved in so many different ways, Was the first time it was working when we had a legal dispute that turned in our favor? Is that the first time? Is it the first time that people came together at a workshop and there was this community that was forming? Is that when it started working? Was it when we were, figuring out the legalities of certain things and getting a little bit of a picture of, where our rights were and where our rights weren't? Is that so? So I can't say it was when this thing happened that suddenly. For me, it was almost like it's like a river. As we flow through, sometimes it gets really narrow and sometimes it's like wide and, kind of all comes at you. But I think that within the people that have been involved and within the trust that the mandate of actors who have become members have given to the executive through all the iterations it has been, because there are executive committee members who have come for a period of time and then left. And I think that through all of those, there's been a belief with the people at the Exco and the people that they are connected to and networked with and influenced, who have influence, that there's no question that this has to be there.
Yeah.
It's not like, should we, shouldn't we?
Yeah.
It's like, this has to. The question just is who's going to be on board and who's willing to stand up.
Yeah.
And the more we've gone down the line, the more, people are willing to stand up. And something that you were mentioning earlier, if I'm a SAGA member, am I going to lose work? And the question that I have is, who knows you're a SAGA member? Like the executive in the office knows, because we have your membership number and we know who you are, and we know that your application's been approved. But nobody in the world knows who you are.
And we deal with your disputes.
Yes. But the producer doesn't know if you're a SAGA member when you get cast or when you walk onto set or when you're in rehearsal. So why are you afraid?
Yeah.
SAGA's we stand in the gap. We're that representation that says you don't have to stand up and, freak out about it because you have people you can come to. We have that legal support. We have that.
There is literally no other sector where people have a fear of belonging to a representative organization.
Right.
If you have to go to the acting world in the US, it's not just a matter of, are you a SAG-AFTRA member?
Yeah.
It's, you're not going to be here until you sign up as a union member.
100%.
You don't work here until you're a member of the union.
Yeah.
And in South Africa, whether you're talking about the mining sector or freight or agriculture, you don't have to worry about, will I get work if I'm a union member? It is expected that you are a union member in order to derive the benefits of union membership. It's only in the creative sector, for some reason, again, we infuse this entire discussion with fear about, can I lose work? Can I lose work? Join the organization that's going to fight for your rights, because you can't do it on your own.
100%.
It is as simple as that. Over the years, I've met too many people, too many, very well-known, self-important actors who say, I had a meeting with so-and-so from Mnet, and I used to talk to Hlaudli Motsoeneng all the time, and I still know so-and-so who's the minister of this and that, and I speak to the president, I grew up with him. I don't care.
Yeah.
Organization requires that you actually do the work and that you are having the meetings, the follow-ups, you have the archive of the entire correspondence history, you have the policy papers, you've analyzed the white paper, you've made submissions based on legislation that's now being revised. You have participated in the democratic process, not by being a self-important prick on social media, but actually doing the work, writing it down, researching it, getting legal advice, paying for it. And then you send your submission. Now you are making an active contribution. And if you are not prepared to do that, then you on your own are nothing more than a voice in the wilderness that's at best trying to serve as a distraction to the people who are actually doing the job.
Which makes me think that maybe people don't really understand what SAGA is about, Jack. Because they'll ride with an individual who hoppers on things like that very easily and very quickly.
Yeah.
Because they either have a reputation or some level of influence. So then, what is it that people are missing about SAGA? Well, like, what's the misconception? Whether from actors, from people, producers, broadcasters, just from what is the misconception about us?
I think we've never understood the value of mobilizing as a group. And, part of that is the nature and the reality of our work.
Yeah.
We don't have a factory floor where we can organize together over a lunchtime and speak to our union rep. There's no such thing. We all work at different times and on different parts of the script. We come together to produce that moment of magic, and it's recorded for posterity, and then it's on the screen. And I may never see you again.
Yeah.
And that's just the reality we've come to accept. Within that, and I think this is, to go back to Carlynn's point about how do we measure success? One of the ways we can measure success is that SAGA has successfully mobilized hundreds of professional actors into a single representative body. We have a mandate, we have a voice, we are absolutely taken seriously to the point that we are the very center of the discussions taking place right now about labor reform, whether it's in Parliament, whether it's in NEDLAC, whether it's in the Department of Employment and Labor. All those conversations are taking place because of SAGA's activism. We were the ones who drafted the documents that are now sitting in front of, whether it's the DG or whether it's the Minister of Employment and Labor. We were the ones who did the hard yards. That is what you get after 15 years of dedicated work. That is what you get after 15 years of sacrifice. You want to measure success? It's with the hundreds and hundreds of actors who have joined the cause. We are a movement. We're a movement for transformation.
I think I want to add to that, and that is we also have had a lot of guidance. So we haven't done this in a vacuum. In 2012, SAGA became part of the Federation of International Actors, the umbrella body of all the 80 plus countries around the world. And at the very, very first meeting, which I attended and paid for myself because SAGA didn't have money, I sat in this room of 100, maybe 200 plus people.
Sure.
And I stood at the door and I was totally overwhelmed. And I didn't know where to sit. I didn't know what the protocols were. I didn't know whether we belonged or didn't belong. And there was this amazing gentleman who introduced himself to me. And he was like, "Hi, this is who I am. I'm from this union, which is sag-aftra. I think you need to come sit next to me." And from that day, they took us under their wing.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I don't know how. They still do. And with all the meetings that we held with Equity or ACTRA Canada, we learned how it works in the rest of the world and would bring that back to implement into SAGA. So that kind of gave us a way to go, maybe, maybe not. I remember sitting there and hearing about collective agreements, and I was like, okay, maybe we can do this. And royalties. So I was like, oh, wow, royalties.
That's
imagine. So one of the gentlemen said, no, you must go and meet this amazing man called Jose Maria Montes. He knows all about this royalty thing. So I was like, okay, cool. I went and, do you have 5 minutes? Great, sat down. He's like, South Africa, just let me have a look. He pulled out our legislation. He went, oh, yeah, no, you don't actually have you don't have the provisions to be able to do this.
Sure.
I was like, sorry, what do you mean? You don't have provisions? No, our legislation doesn't do it. Why? Because royalties is from 1967. And this is 2012. Just to say it's now 2026 and we still don't have it. And then we're talking about collective agreements. And it's like, okay, how does that work? Okay, yeah, no. I'm like, yeah, I'm sure we can get producers together. We can start talking about contracts and kind of agree to this. Like, maybe that's the way to go. Like, edit interim. And we started that conversation. I remember we started with a film contract and we're chatting to some producers and all of that, and then realized somewhere down the line that we weren't allowed to do that either. But having that guidance and that, we get more support from the internationals than we do locally.
Which is shocking.
And that for me is incredibly sad and makes me really angry because we have the best advice ever. And I'm actually really proud because the SAG-AFTRA strike from 2023, the midnight their time when they are, at the press conference, they go, we are going to strike. You have Fran Drescher and you have Duncan Crabtree Island who's standing there at the podium, and Duncan finishes off his address with, and we have support from our international affiliates and friends, South Africa and New Zealand. And just having said that, we are top of mind and we have that support. So whatever the framework and map is, if we don't know, we have people we can go to.
For sure.
So what is this independent contractor versus employee status thing? There's a whole bunch of research that they've done. So we have access to that.
Yeah.
So we, SAGA will be the people who will make the submission because we'll also speak to them and go, guys, this is what we think. Do you have anything to add? What is your take on it? Do you have some advice? We're not doing this because we think we know better. We're doing this because we know what is expected in a professional industry, in a regulated industry. We know what that looks like, and we have advice from people who work within that. Yes, obviously we have, different legislation, but given what it is, we have people who will give of their time, their effort. There's no reason why they should take our phone call. I mean, I have them on WhatsApp. But the beauty is that they believe in us, which sometimes when things look a little bit grim here, I'll take that.
Yeah.
I'll take you believing in me more than we can sometimes believe in ourselves.
Sure.
But over the years, we have really gotten to the point where we believe in ourselves. I will not sit back and kind of shy away from the fact that there are members who rely on us. And I can't let the industry down that I am passionate about. That is the livelihood of thousands and thousands of creatives who bring the most incredible magic to every single person on this planet.
Yeah.
How? How can I walk away and turn away from that when I know that there is a way forward? Adding to what you were saying about submissions, not only employment and labor, but when it's come to copyright and the Performance Protection Amendment bills, we've been there every single time Parliament has said, please come and talk to us. We were there.
Yeah.
There aren't any policies at the moment with AI. SAGA's already made a submission to the department. I'm not going to wait for you. I'm going to tell you what we want.
Yeah.
How do we know? Because we have international precedents that we can go to, that we can go.
Doing it already.
Exactly. And that way, at least we come with the solutions. And I think that's the big thing is we know how things can work. We know what the solutions could be.
Yeah.
So let us help you to get us into that direction.
So as a SAGA member, now there's an actor who's contemplating, and I really hope you're contemplating. Someone's sitting there thinking, oh, I'm not a SAGA member. I'm hearing all of this stuff and they've just landed on some gold telling me about SAG-AFTRA, because the minute I hear SAG-AFTRA, my eyes just light up, right? What's the benefit on like the ground for an actor when they're a SAGA member from a professional standpoint? Practically, what's the benefit?
There are so many depending on what becomes important to the actor.
Sure.
And I think often, for somebody new coming into the industry, information is really important. They want to be part of the workshops. They want to up their skills. They want to, be part of a community, feel like they can learn from being in a room with some of the professionals and, people who've come before, that they can grow. So for young young professionals coming into the industry, those are things that become really important. For example, for people who've been kind of settled into the industry for a little bit, kind of looking at who I am as a professional, as a working person. It's a funeral policy, making sure that, I'm not relying on my family to have to look after me if something happens, whether it's estate planning, how do I take myself seriously as a business? The legal part when it comes to the fact that I'm engaging in contracts all the time. I think what people don't realize is SAGA can be with you from the very beginning.
Yeah.
So the beginning of that process, I've got a brief, I get a job, I get a contract, I get there at all those points. SAGA is there for its members to be able to give advice and offer support depending on where that insecurity is, within that, within that actor's career. I think the legal often is the one thing that makes people really stand up, because that's where people feel helpless. And that's where most people have always felt helpless. Like, I have to sign this contract because it's a take it or leave it.
Right.
So what recourse do I have when things go wrong? As Jack was saying earlier, if I do something wrong, I'll be penalized. If the other person does something wrong, nothing happens.
Yeah.
So where's that? And that's where SAGA comes in, because the big brother stands next to you and goes, okay, so these are your rights. This is your protection. This is what we can do. We can act on your behalf, but we have to have your mandate to do it. You have to be an active, fully paid up member.
Yeah.
The being part of the networking events and webinars.
IMDb.
Yes, that
Massive discount.
Yeah, 25% off IMDb. And more we're looking at, bringing in additional benefits that we can.
Yeah.
Discounted theatre tickets are an example of that. So I think really the itemized benefits, obviously you got to have them on the website, and SAGA is very big with that. It's a huge resource.
Yeah.
The SAGA website is a massive resource for actors, whether they are SAGA members or not. But you can see from the breakdown, from the funeral benefits to the IMDb, to the structured and organized workshops, to the submissions that we are making, to the surveys, to the access to whether you want to learn about how to become an intimacy coordinator, or whether you want to join one of the associate organizations like SWIFT, Sisters Working in Film and Television.
Yeah.
We are at the heart of all those conversations. And if actors see themselves as professional, and obviously we prefer working with professionals because that's how we distinguish ourselves as an industry as opposed to a hobby.
Right.
You'll want to have actors taking care of their careers and having a career plan and a strategy. So that's something that SAGA provides. It's obviously it becomes a different conversation at the point that we can unionize, and that is imminent.
Yeah.
So we are at that point now where SAGA's conversations have brought us to the turning point. We have been agitating for this change, and we have now arrived at that place where we are in conversations with COSATU, South Africa's biggest labor federation, and we are in discussion with government. We've got to now decide on the introduction of labor protection in the industry. What does that look like?
Right.
And of course, government wants to know from us. And, government is going to, they want this, they want to initiate a conversation with the industry itself.
Yeah.
Parts of the industry are saying, well, we want nothing to do with this because, we don't think that it's a very good idea. I'm part of the 30% and I would rather not have anything to do with this, you know. You have parts of the industry that are saying that. They are effectively removing themselves from the conversation.
Sure.
And I suppose they will, reap the consequences of that down the line. Personally, I'm only too happy that they are not in the conversation, presenting an obstacle to honest conversations about what the progressive transformation could look like.
Yeah.
But as far as SAGA is concerned, we're not waiting. We're not waiting for anyone to join this little soiree.
Yeah.
We are very happy to own that space because we helped to create it.
Sure.
And the conversations that we are having with government represent simply the the biggest tide change that we could have ever wished for, but it has taken 15 years of hard work. So the benefits, aside from belonging to the most vocal and the most active actors representative organization, a reminder also that with that, whatever your membership contributions were for the year, you can claim back from tax.
Yep. Which you can learn in a SAGA workshop.
That's right.
There are like 3 or 4 we've done already, and we will continue to do them.
You know, it actually reminds me of a time where I had a contract from a particular production and I wasn't very like finicky about terms and stuff, and got some advice. And the advice was, hey, you are aware that there's no termination clause for you, but there is one for production.
Excellent.
Wow. I was none the wiser, but thanks for letting me know. And it was a back and forth with production for a while until eventually I got the termination clause.
Nice.
I mean, you know, it's a small thing, but it's actually not a small thing.
It's massive.
It's massive,
huge.
yeah. But it's a small detail that you miss because you are worried about getting the job and how much you're getting
But you
paid
read your
per day.
contract.
That time, probably not.
Okay.
Yeah. But that's the kind of lesson, you know, that we want every actor to go through.
Yeah.
To reach that point when you realize you have just dodged a bullet that could have eaten the rest of your career.
Yeah.
And you vow never to make that mistake again.
Oh, yeah.
That's why SAGA is there to support people through understanding the contract.
For sure. Now, I've always been fascinated by the idea of us EXCO members not being paid. Now, I'd love to know, is there a story behind why we are volunteers?
Yes, there isn't any money.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's the simple truth. I also think that the moment people get paid, their reason for doing things sometimes becomes possibly skewed or
altered.
self-interest or, you know, something like that. And, you know, I mean, is it ideal? No, it's not. But if it had to, I mean, so my comparison always is in a lot of the bigger unions overseas, you have the office that gets paid.
Yes.
And then you have the board or the EXCO who are the representatives. So, for example, the new president of SAG-AFTRA, they're the figurehead, so to speak.
Right.
The difficulty is that we don't have the engine room. We don't have money for the engine room. We don't have money to employ 25 people.
Yeah.
And at the moment, there isn't a need to do that because we don't have everything in place yet. We don't have the legislation, et cetera, to be able to do that. And also because of that, if we're not representing, you know, all of the actors in the country, then the need is less. So we are kind of at that point where it's like, the engine room is a lot for the amount of time, energy, and effort that we all have to put in.
Sure.
But it's that it kind of comes to that breaking point at some point. So, I mean, I don't think it's ever been like a thing that said, you know, so everybody has to be a volunteer. It's just like we are volunteers. That's just what we are.
Yeah, on principle, that was important to us from the very beginning. At the time that SAGA was being constituted, and at the time that, you know, we were discussing whether there should be the SA Guild of Actors or the SA Guild of Artists. Of course, one of the decisions turned on what would our domain be like, you know, if we were, and we realized it would actually sound better if we the SA Guild of Actors instead of the SA Guild of Fartists.
Right.
Important things, right?
Very.
It was at the same
Legacy
time.
thinking.
Yeah, strategic thinking. We worked out even then that there were a number of organizations that were popping up out of nowhere. There were some conversations taking place, you know, under the ANC as a political party that were opening doors into government funding.
Sure.
We were very aware of that. So there's a lot of dirty political gameplay going on, and our industry is very used to being played as a political football. And we realize that the key to that is asking for funding, asking for payment, for fees, to be paid for your work. And it was very clear to everyone who had founded SAGA. And no, for the record, Kagiso Medupe did not found SAGA.
Just a trap.
Yes, despite his fervent claims, the decision was that we will not be played by people who pay us. We don't want payment because we are fixed on a vision of what the industry can be and what it should be. And we had, in the early years, perhaps the vision wasn't that clear. It had to be cleared as we continued our work day to day, month to month, year on year. But it was painfully obvious. By the time we reached 2014 or so, with the establishment of SIFSA, the Cultural and Creative Industries Federation of South Africa, and the way that was literally established to be a mouthpiece for the ANC, where certain people were parachuted into leadership positions and paid, where even up to today, questions remain about what happened to the money.
Yeah.
It was just last year, in fact, when Minister Gayton McKenzie of Sports, Arts and Culture was at Winnie Khumalo's funeral. And in his address, he stated very clearly, SIFSA is a criminal organization and they are yet to account for the monies that were paid to them by the department. And this is really interesting to me because you have performers who were sitting in that structure. Tony Koroge himself was president of that organization and up to today has not been forthcoming about where the money went. Because the question is, who gets to pay for the funerals of all these artists who are dying in poverty?
Right.
And how did organizations like SIFSA come up to pursue an agenda that was never made clear? And money was being spent annually. That is public money. That is money that's coming from Treasury through to the department, being fed into this shell of a federation in an unregulated industry. And it becomes very clear that you will always find that there are questions around the motivations and the agendas of people who are being paid to be in leadership positions. SAGA wanted nothing to do with that because we were driven on a principle. We were motivated by service, not by payment. And we remain that way today.
Yeah,
Also that we're not politically aligned. It's really important for us because we want to be able to hold everybody to account.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter who you are. Doesn't matter. We will hold everybody to account. So we don't want to play politics.
And our members hold us to account.
Yeah.
That's why we have an AGM, and that's why we have to have a chairman's report and a treasurer's report. We have to account for every single cent. Every one of all our expenses and our finances are audited every year. And this is what we have to do in terms of our report back to our members annually.
And I love that even at the AGM, when giving these reports, like people can actually ask questions. And when a question is asked, there's an answer. The level of transparency within SAGA, honestly, it's beautiful. Leadership, I commend you. I commend
And you, sir, as leadership.
You are leadership.
You are also leadership.
This leads me to, as we gear up to wrap up, this has been so great for me. I always love hearing just a lot more information about SAGA. It just makes it more clearer, and it also kind of affirms my position being here in Exco, because sometimes one does question, like, do you know enough? Do you not know enough? And there's still so much to learn because it's such a rapidly evolving space that we're in. So 1 minute you're reading about things from the past, but the things that are relevant today are also very important. So a lot is happening. But what are the risks that we're exposed to right now as actors? What is the industry? Where is it falling short? I mean, I know that we're all for industry regulation, but where are these potholes?
Sure.
I mean, there's many.
There are many. I think the our biggest challenge as SAGA is dealing with people who are deliberately and intentionally misleading people about the conversation of regulation.
Okay.
They are actively propagating disinformation, not misinformation. There's a difference, and it has to do with intent. There are people who are trying to subvert the process of regulation because they earn more money in an unregulated industry. There is no lid on the cookie jar. They don't want one there. And they will do everything in their power to make sure that nothing stops the process of them getting their hand into that cookie jar.
Sure.
SAGA has always stood on the principle of transparency, justice, and fairness. We have always used international best practices as a guideline for how the South African creative industry can and should be regulated. We have adopted many of those processes, even in terms of our own structure. And we have described what those processes should be in our submissions to government and to Parliament as well. So the challenges, the obstacles are coming from the parts of the industry that absolutely flat out reject transformation of any kind, that reject regulation of any kind, and they're the ones causing uncertainty amongst many professional creatives, many actors as well. Our biggest task, therefore, as SAGA is to try to mobilize the largest possible amount of actors into, number one, becoming members, and number two, into supporting SAGA's agenda for transformation in the form of regulation of the sector, described by collective bargaining rights and an active participation of a strong union.
I think some of the other threats that we don't necessarily, that you hear on set, etc., things like AI and those kinds of things that threaten the industry. SAGA is the only one having those conversations in those rooms. So whatever other threats there may be that actors face on a day-to-day basis, all of it becomes part of the industry regulation. All of it becomes part of being able to bring that in order to protect your rights. So it might seem like it's, an arbitrary something on the side, but imagine if you knew that the contract you were signing protected your rights under AI, under, certain labor legislation, and that was negotiated in the contract that there is. You can't change it. It is the collective agreement. Imagine if that could be how you went to work.
That would be beautiful.
Imagine as an agent sitting there and not having to go through every single contract that comes across your desk because you know that people have changed it because they haven't told you and it serves them. And if you don't like it, well, just thank you very much for playing.
I know we're running out of time, but I would really love for you to talk about some of those contractual provisions that have been introduced that specifically erode actors' rights.
The first one, taking out any kind of earning for principal performers through multi-choice. In some of the international contracts, it says that you may not become a member of a guild or a union, which goes against our constitutional right in this country.
Completely.
That there's a force majeure that comes in, which basically says that they treat force majeure as, if you don't get funding from a certain government organization, that they can call for force majeure. Force majeure is unseen consequences. I'm surely you can foresee something if you're talking about funding and you know that there may be people who may or may not pay you.
Sure.
This is not an act of God. It is very potentially going to happen given the track record of some of the departments, specifically around the film incentive. There's so many that come in where, people use you exclusively, but they don't pay you for exclusivity.
AI.
AI is another one. Sexual harassment. None of these things have been updated in contracts. So it's something that SAGA pushes a lot. We were part of this Swift Sisters Working in Film and Television. We were part of putting their protocols together. The guide to reporting is a SAGA guide to reporting. Intimacy coordinators. Internationally that became a thing. At the same time, it was becoming a thing in South Africa. It just happened to kind of dovetail. And SAGA was part of assisting with the protocols on how is this going to work.
Yeah.
When it came to COVID, we ensured that there were certain protocols that were going to be, have to abide by in order for people to get back to work in lockdown 4. Nobody else did. I mean, the theatre was a whole different disaster altogether. But the contracts need to be able to reflect the working environment. And because we don't have industry regulation in many of those areas, like health and safety, like, UIF and those areas, like that's where our hands are tied. Because contractually, we don't have enough bargaining power. You have, these big broadcaster producers who say this is how it's going to work and, take it or leave it. But more and more, SAGA has been able to add to existing agreements those things that are becoming really important. So your contract is the only thing that you have. So you got to make sure that you read it and speak to your agent, speak to SAGA and go, I don't know what I'm signing here. Can you help me? That's why we're here, is to ensure that you are taking yourself seriously as a professional.
Contract is the only thing we have until the union becomes a reality.
Yeah.
And that's on our doorstep.
And collective bargaining, then that contract is, then that's a fantastic document. I can't wait to see that one, let me tell you.
I like the smiles that I'm seeing. Jack,
This is the thing. This is the moment we go, imagine what that could be like. Then that invigorates going, okay, what's the letter I need to write? What's the email I need to... Yeah, exactly.
Jack, as SAGA's chairman, what are you most proud of right now in this moment?
I am so proud that SAGA can attend an event in Cape Town or Bloem or Durban or Krugersdorp, and people will know SAGA. I am so proud that on any given day of the week, we're going to receive a request from the Department of Employment and Labour or the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, requesting a meeting to talk about some pivotal, some key transformative policy or legislative change. And the same applies with the Department of Communications and Digital Technology, because SAGA is central to all these discussions. That, for me, is the greatest source of pride. Perhaps more than that is the executive committee team that we have forged together. I am so incredibly impressed and grateful that you have people on this team that pitch up and they will work. And you can see those emails coming. It's after 1, it's after 2 in the morning. The day job stuff is done. But now we get to SAGA stuff. And it is such a privilege to be able to share that kind of work with people who are that committed, who give of themselves with such courage and without question, because we all come together in a way that demonstrates, that leads by example and shows actors your faith is well placed in us. You need to remain confident in your team, in SAGA, and in what we have achieved, and in our vision and our ability to deliver on that. And serving with this executive committee team, representing the rights of the actors that I care about and know and love and respect, that for me is the thing I'm most proud of.
Sure. Yeah, that's beautiful. Madam Carl, let's just say 20 years from now, what would you hope are the words from actors, from the industry, from emerging students that are coming into the industry and are so eager? What would you imagine the words they would share about SAGA to be?
SAGA did it. SAGA did it.
Ooh.
SAGA did it.
Yeah.
Royalties, we did it. Industry regulation, collective agreements, we did it. AI, we did it. Because we're doing it now.
Yeah.
And there will be a point where we'll be able to have a line in the sand that says, here's the legislation, here are the changes in the act, here are the regulations, this is how it gets implemented, this is where it is. SAGA did it.
SAGA did it. 20 years from now, we're going to come back to this podcast, episode 2, and remember that SAGA did it. In closing, either one of you, it's been such a privilege to share this time with you. For an actor, whether seasoned or not, whether young, matured, what's your encouragement to that actor that's not a SAGA member?
It's time to step up. This is the moment where you get to show up in your career, for yourself, for your colleagues, and for your future. There will always be that time when you'll have to check yourself against your own conscience and answer honestly about whether you cared enough to step up to join this movement, a movement that's bigger than all of us, or whether you back down and chose rather to focus on yourself.
Guys, this is SAGA Speaks. And if there's one thing that is clear today, is that SAGA is more than just an organization. We're a movement that stands on industry regulation. Now I have to do the finicky stuff, go ahead, like and subscribe, comment, do all that lovely stuff. But what's important, here is that I remind you to share this episode with someone who you believe needs to hear this. There's a lot of questions going around about SAGA, the work that we do, what we've done, what we haven't done, the contribution that SAGA does in an actor's day-to-day life. Nevertheless, let's talk about the contribution that actors pour into SAGA when you join the community. I urge you, share this with an actor that you believe needs to hear it. Because 20 years from now, SAGA did it. Jack, Carlynn, this was beautiful, and I'm really glad we could do this, and this was our second episode.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Cheers to industry regulation.
Yeah. And the team. We're a team.
Yeah.
We are a formidable team, let me tell you.
And
Very
that's
proud.
a cut.